the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
Alright, hello and welcome to HBR Talk 328. How is this legal? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks, and we're continuing with our look at Rouse and his weirdness and government weirdness and all that jazz. That last week we had serious technical difficulties with the show. I've done some testing with OBS and I couldn't replicate it. But I also wasn't test streaming to all of the Badger channels. So if it recurs tonight, maybe then we look at whether or not it's restream. But if it doesn't recur tonight, then I have no idea what happened last week.
We have some kind of an idea, but you know.
Yeah. I disclaim and stuff. So yeah, I'm not going there just yet. But I just, the more I look into this stuff and the more I hear back and forth, there's been some other stuff that has happened over the last year that's been weird. Someone we know from our previous discussions on the topic of incels kind of seems to have gone off the deep end in ways that I don't even know how it happened. And there's some indication from a journalist who has talked to me about it that it wasn't natural. And so I mean, there's a lot of stuff, so it's not hard to start like delving into Alex Jones territory here. But especially considering what we're talking about, which is already Alex Jones territory.
Yes.
So I'm gonna try not to do that, but I'm not gonna judge anybody who does. Because I honestly do not have a conclusion about this, I guess would be the best way to put it. What happened last week. So let's see how this plays. It was playing fine before I started the show, because I tested it multiple times. So here we go. I've backtracked a little bit. So that we're going to repeat a little bit, a few seconds before we ended last night. We were talking last night about the connection to Ralph's wife's company, and I'm not going to go over that again. I actually closed the post that was about that. I can put up. I still have the post open where it's confirmed by Congressman Getz, but this rest of this, I'll just let it speak for itself. But before we get into that, as always, Honeybadger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions when we don't get shut down by mysterious circumstances. And as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. Some of those thoughts are really provoked, guys. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platforms tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justtip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And yeah, we trigger the thoughts at both ends, so there you go. Mangaka 92 says both left-wing and right-wing thoughts. If you put them both together, you get a whole harpy.
A whole bird.
Oh my gosh. In the time that it took me to do the intro, I got 10 Twitter notifications in an argument I've been in since.
Oh.
I'm looking at this going, I'm not going to click.
Your Twitter arguments are legendary.
Oh
they
my
really
gosh.
are.
Hey, this one now has both me and Karen in it, so it's getting good.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah. But anyway, here we go. Play. Seriously, it is. It's not playing.
Now, HSI first came up
Phew.
on my radar in 2021 as being this very curious, wide-ranging role in January 6th. Folks, I've mentioned this, I believe, on your show before when we talked about January 6 issues, but you can look. Everyone now can look up an individual named Jeremy Brown, who was one of these folks affiliated with the Oath Keepers in the run-up to the January 6 affair. And he had his door knocked on by two HSI agents in about a month before January 6th. And he secretly recorded his conversations with these two HSI agents. And the tape is absolutely stunning. They were concerned about upcoming protest activities a month before January 6th happened. They asked Jeremy Brown to basically infiltrate the Oath Keepers, to basically participate in everything. They threatened him with carrots and sticks. Basically, they said, they effectively said in so many words, we can make your life really hard, or we can, we can do this the easy way.
So I just want to point out, what we just heard described was them pressuring him to infiltrate and spy on a political organization.
Mm.
Right? And we know, I want to remind everybody about the kidnapping plot for the Michigan governor, which turned out to be orchestrated by the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the young man who, the schizophrenic young man who was groomed into going with an FBI agent to get, I guess, explosive devices or guns or something that basically the kid couldn't have done what he was accused of doing on his own. He needed them to give him the idea,
Mm-hmm.
show him how to do it, obtain the weapons for him, and then drive him to the location to get them. That was what his case centered around. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, that's the FBI grabbing somebody and taking them along with them on the commission of a crime, in the commission of a crime, and then pretending that he did it.
God damn. People are fucking evil.
Yeah. And like that's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at the government through its agencies manipulating ordinary citizens into criminal activity and then arresting them for it and saying, "Look, we stopped this person from doing this horrible thing."
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God.
And this mostly targets men. They didn't go knock on a woman's door.
Of course not.
So let's see. Get it to play some more. Yeah, see, none of this was happening before I started the
Wow.
broadcast.
Yeah, and that maybe there's even going to be a job for you in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. It was basically, either you become an agent of DHS's operation ahead of January 6th, or you, a regular civilian who has committed no crimes, will have your life destroyed. And they even called him on his cell phone at 9 a.m. that day. HSI was involved in dozens of these undercovers, and they coordinated with the FBI through the Joint Terrorism Task Force. But then, lo and behold, HSI reappears in Trump assassination story number 1. If you recall, during the
just to reiterate, here their carrots and sticks basically were, we're gonna make you work for us. That's the carrot.
Mm-hmm.
And the stick is we wreck your life. We accuse you of things. We prosecute you. And you kind of wonder how they're able to find people to do this kind of thing, right? It's not recruitment. It's extortion. It's blackmail.
Yeah. Yeah. God damn. See, because in my mind, the first place my mind went to was, it's like brainwashing, right? They find these people and they gaslight them into having these positions. But I don't even know why. Like manipulation and coercion didn't even pop into my head. But Jesus.
Yeah. And here's where I'm going
That's
to talk about the Vietnam War. Our generation, we grew up with family members. Everybody I know has at least one family member that was in the military that fought in Vietnam or in Korea during that time period. And we all have heard stories about there being that one guy in the platoon or in their unit or whatever that either they directly knew them or they had heard other people talking about it that did crazy things like collecting ears of their kills. And turns out, that their reason for enlistment was to get their prison sentence for some horrible violent crime committed. And
Jesus.
that happened during the Vietnam War. There were prisoners who were approached by the military who were told, yes, you committed these violent crimes. We will commute your sentence if you go fight for us in the military. And it makes me kind of wonder, did they use this kind of tactics? You could stay in jail for the rest of your life. We can tell the guards that you refused.
Jesus.
Yeah. That's terrifying to me that the government can get away with doing that kind of thing to people. You don't get a choice, and it's bad enough that they drafted men. It's bad enough that they forced them to go fight in the first place. But then to come along and take men who maybe were not eligible prior to the war, because prior to the war, those men, if they had tried to enlist, they would have been ineligible to serve.
Mm.
I don't know if anybody's ever listened to Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie. It's like, kind of, it's old stuff. It's old. Arlo Guthrie was the son of Woody Guthrie, the writer of "This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is My Land." You know that.
Oh, okay, okay.
Oh, Susanna. You know, a bunch of the songs we sang, Gen X sang when we were little kids in school.
Yeah.
Right. Arlo Guthrie was a hippie. He was a anti-war protester. He was at Woodstock, and he had this great 18-minute long comedy routine, musical comedy routine called Alice's Restaurant. And as part of, you'll hear it if you turn on certain FM stations. There's one here in Dayton that one year played Alice's Restaurant over and over again all day on Thanksgiving, because the story is about Thanksgiving, but it's really about the draft. And so he tells the story of being drafted with, I guess, a felony littering crime on his record, because it was illegal dumping, basically. And he tells the story of how his error in judgment was made with regard to the illegal dumping and what happened, you know, with the legal case and everything. And, you know, he had a $50 fine and had to pick up the garbage, basically. But then he goes on and tells how it affected his experience of being drafted and the paperwork that he had to fill out. And, you know, they basically, he has this one line, you know, about the military not being willing to take him as a guy who was convicted of illegal dumping at one point in his life, unless he said he was rehabilitated. Yeah, I can see that there are we have sits like in you, father rapers. He knows the sketch. But it is an ironically funny story. The whole thing is an ironically funny story. But according to that paperwork, he had to say he had rehabilitated himself in order to get in the military. And he's like, "You mean you want to know if I'm moral enough to join the military, go overseas, fight a war?" I can't remember the exact line. Burn women, children, houses, and villages after being a litter bug. Like, he was just flabbergasted, right? And I don't know if the story is true or not. You know, how much, like, it's comedy, so you don't know. But that's pretty much the mindset, you know, ever since then. Like, the military, for the longest time, if you had a conviction on your record, it was a lot harder to get in. You had to kind of prove that you weren't nuts or dangerous to other people, that your intentions were good. You know, they didn't want to take somebody that was violent and threatening to their neighbors and train them 100 ways to kill a man. But during the Vietnam War, they threw all that out the window. They took people with mental health conditions. They took people who were gay. They took people who had criminal records. They were willing to take people who couldn't see well enough to shoot straight. And I know that because I tried to draft my dad, and my dad's eyesight was so bad. He tried to get in right out of high school, and they wouldn't take him because his eyesight was insufficient, and he knew they wouldn't take him. And so he memorized the eye chart.
Shut up.
So then, you know, like, the guy figured it out really quickly that he had memorized the eye chart.
Yeah.
And he's like, he embarrassed him. He took him outside, and he's like, you got to see how great this guy's our next sniper. His eyesight is fabulous, right? And he points down the street, and he's like, read the license plate on that truck. And my dad's, what truck?
Yeah.
So he didn't get in. But, and when he was no longer eligible to be drafted, they sent him a notice. And it was, he had to demonstrate that he wasn't eligible. But yeah, that just like, by that time he was not in the same circumstances, and going into the military was not a good option for him. But yeah, they changed their standards, and they exploit men who they have no business even allowing in when they're desperate, when they need cannon fodder. And it's the same thing. Jen Bottle was pointing out, on the other hand, local judges would offer arrestees a stint in the Marines instead of jail or prison. So you're looking at complete and utter lack of standards. Men just get exploited. They don't care if men are capable of doing what they're demanding, or willing to do what they're demanding. You talk about, like, I'm in this argument that's been going on since January with women who are constantly harping on women have the right to do what they want with their own bodies. Men don't even own their own bodies. The government can take your body and throw it into war and get it blown up, or shot, or cut up, or stuck in a cell or a hole in the ground for years, and you have no recourse.
Yeah.
And women whine about not being able to kill their babies. Which,
my body, my choice. Okay.
Which they did to the tune of 1 million last year. 1 million abortions. There were 3 million recorded deaths. Slightly over 3 million recorded deaths in the United States, and slightly over 1 million abortions. So 1 in 4 deaths in the United States was caused by being aborted.
God damn. But it's healthcare, Hannah. It's healthcare. Those women are now very healthy. All those babies very much dead. Those babies very much dead, but those women are healthy.
Absolutely.
That's all they fucking care about. Oh my God.
Yep. So, just with that in mind, we'll continue here after, what you just heard about the government exploiting people and the government having different standards depending on its needs for how it uses men.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let this go through it. So I don't want to play the video.
Butler, Pennsylvania rally. There was diminished Secret Service representation because of 2 things. One, there was the tail end of the NATO summit. So Secret Service had to be deployed for all the VIPs around the NATO summit. And then there was Joe Biden's trip, which then also, reduced the present capacity of the Secret Service. And so the top-up agents for the Secret
Oh, jeez.
Really? Let's go back.
Service.
There we go.
For Trump assassination attempt number 1 came from HSI, this exact division, which was doing the Fedsurrection on January 6th. And lo and behold,
I'm glad we called it that.
Yeah.
HSI once again in Trump assassination attempt number 2, who was explicitly referred to investigate the person the CIA had put out a bolo on, because he appeared to be doing the exact thing the CIA was already doing, but in an unauthorized fashion. And
so just let's go back and hear that part again.
Jesus Christ.
Is this the FBI Or the CIA, the government agency, three-letter agent, or is this the Keystone Cops?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Go back one more. That's 30. There we go. Back to 27. All right. So let's. Come on.
Was explicitly referred to investigate the person the CIA had put out a bolo on. Because he appeared to be doing the exact thing the CIA was already doing, but in an unauthorized fashion. And lo and behold, HSI, even apparently to CBP's bewilderment, refused to look at it even for a millisecond.
So what he just said was the CIA was apparently trying to entrap someone into the assassination attempt that Routh did. And they got Routh on their radar. They asked HSI to investigate. They gave HSI the story. This guy might actually be trying to do this. And HSI went, we don't need to look at that guy.
You're just the man for the job. What are you talking about?
We're not going to investigate that. In all seriousness, we just heard that our security agency for the national security of the United States, for the Homeland Security investigations, chose not to investigate a lead on a potential assassin of a presidential candidate who has been president.
It's insane.
Not because some rando reported it and they didn't believe him, but after the CIA told them.
It's just so brazen. Like so I don't know. I know how I've been kind of on the fence with, are they going to steal it? Are they going to let him win? Are they going to steal it? And somebody said something, and I think this is more likely to be what happened. I think they'll let him win, but they're not going to stop trying to kill him.
No.
They're
this
not.
is going to be 4 years of assassination attempts from weirdos and nut jobs and government patsies.
Yeah.
So if you pray, because he's going to need it.
Yeah. My God.
Yeah, and again, we're getting told, vote for Kamala because she's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Shame on you if you don't vote for Kamala because she's a woman. But if the entire government is trying to get rid of this guy, it wouldn't matter the issues at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to vote for him just because the bureaucracy hates him.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's amazing. It's astounding that they don't understand that dynamic, like every time they try to get him, they step on a rake every single time. You know what I mean? Everything that they do, every tactic that they try to pull, it just backfires.
It's rape culture.
Yeah. Yes.
Our federal law enforcement agencies have a rake culture. Oh my God.
Serial rake is going on.
Yep. Oh my God. And yes, Shaman King, you are 100% right. Her being a woman is a reason why you shouldn't vote for Kamala, because her being a woman is a reason why she can cry misogyny anytime she's criticized in order to get out of accountability. We have seen Hillary Clinton doing that the whole time she was part of the federal government and ever since.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't even president. So I don't want a president who can answer. You used the military in an illegal fashion with, "You're just a misogynist. How dare you say that?"
Yeah. Yeah, that's not going to work.
No. We don't want to be taxed into oblivion. You're just a misogynist.
You hate women.
You hate women. Stop taking away our civil rights. You're just a misogynist. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but that's not going to work for me.
Yeah, no, and it's you either hate women or you're afraid of them.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, women killed 1 million human beings last year.
Yeah,
so that's kind of creepy.
Absolutely.
Geez. Here we go. Play. Okay, so
this guy has
worked.
an invincibility cloak. And just to talk a little bit about the history of these invincibility cloaks, understand that every year there are over 25,000 authorized crimes that are authorized by the Justice Department. In fact,
repeat that one too, because that when I first heard this just blew my mind.
5,000.
Let's go back a little more here. And all right,
cloaks.
What he's about to say is just unbelievable.
Understand that every year there are over 25,000 authorized crimes that are authorized by the
authorized crimes.
Whoa.
Is not a phrase that should exist.
No.
Like flat out, there should be no such thing as an authorized crime.
Yeah.
Play.
Justice Department. In fact, if your producer even wants to pull up in the background, just some of the data, you can just run a Google search for FBI authorized crimes and how many there are every year. You can put in, I think 22,800 is an article from 3 or 4 years ago that you can see just for this. But this is part and parcel of what the CIA does. See, we have a special get out of jail free card when you are committing crimes in furtherance of U.S. national interests. This is, by the way, most of what the CIA does. It would be a crime. Money laundering, for example, is a crime if we do it. But if the CIA takes black market goods and launders them into a proprietary bank and traffics in those narcotics to fund a proxy war, or does black market arms deals, if it engages in wire fraud or money laundering, a number of those are authorized. So that this is why the Justice Department has this special relationship with the blob, with this.
When he says the blob, he's talking about the government bureaucracy. But I want to point something out. What he just described is essentially engaging in criminal drug dealing activity, selling drugs to people who may not have used them otherwise, in order to fund an activity that kills hundreds of thousands of men. Because when we hear proxy war, he's not talking about, women throwing water balloons at each other. He's talking about men bombing and shooting and looting, blowing each other up, and burning each other to death in war zones. And proxy wars that the U.S. are involved in have overthrown governments, have created forever wars, like the war that has been ongoing in the Middle East, multiple countries since forever. Right? The U.S. had its proxy war with Russia in Afghanistan that led to Al-Qaeda, that led to uh, ISIS, that led to basically all the terrorist organizations that are involved there now. And this is how it's done. That in order to make this happen, the government allows its actors to commit crimes and launder money in order to fund murder of men.
Scary. It's scary. It's scary. And
Yep.
this is how you get people who are just completely, absolutely against government, like all government, you know, and it's not hard to blame them.
Yeah.
Like,
I
Jesus.
mean, this is what it does. This is
Mhm.
what government does. So when people like to tell me, you know, I'm crazy for being an anarchist, but I mean that this is the result of having a powerful government.
Mhm. It's just the logical conclusion. I mean, get these fuckers out of here.
Yeah.
What are they doing? They're besides killing us.
Well, they're not killing us. We're women.
Well, yes, you know what I mean.
But yeah, they might kill everyone we love.
Yeah.
Got a couple of chats that I'm going to read here. I'm going to double check and make sure I haven't missed a super chow, because if we got one of those, I'm going to read that first. But so many chats here. There we go. Alright, so we do have one super chow. Meredith G gave us $5 and said, HBR Talk 328, honey for the Badgers. If 45 wants to be safe, he's going to have to clean out some three-letter agencies, mass firings. And yeah,
Oh yeah.
from what we just heard, uh-huh.
Mhm.
And we got a Rumble rant from NobaFan21 who gave us $1 and said, Orange Man haters, but my democracy is under attack. Me.
Right.
We never had true democracy, and I'm only hating it more by the minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. The United States has never been a true democracy. A true democracy
No.
would not have, we would have a free-for-all vote. Albert Nader Retro gave us $5 and said, there's a special place in hell. Oh, it's that quote, yep. There's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women, especially colored women of the left. Ketchup! Women most affected! Damn it! That joke is never going to die. Ketchup! Women most affected. Oh my gosh. But like what we're seeing here, what we're seeing in this discussion, and I'm going to continue this for a while, so we may step back to suffrage next week. We may have another thing to discuss next week, but I'll come back to this regardless. And the same thing with the suffrage. When we get done with this, we're going to go back into suffrage because this is so important. It's all so important. And yeah, when they say our democracy, like Xenodemon says, that when they say our democracy, they mean their democracy, not your democracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which, when they use the word democracy, they don't mean democracy. They mean control of the government.
No. Exactly
So,
right.
yeah. Which is basically like having control of the gun.
Mhm.
Or the cannon.
Mhm.
So, let's see if we can get this to play again.
CIA, State Department, DOD apparatus, because we need to maintain a parallel justice system. One for bad criminals, people like you and me if we commit crimes, and one for good criminals who are doing criminal activity, which is the plausibly deniable dirty work that is done by the swarm army of assets and liaisons and back channels and operatives of the national security state around the world. And there are few darker places in that story than the recruitment of terrorists to serve as human meat fodder for a NATO war. And
Yeah, and I'm gonna go off on again because I talked about this the last couple shows too. When we hear about terrorists in the news, people, they got a mental image of just these angry, hateful, for no reason, angry, hateful, crazy people that just suddenly decided to start committing horrible war crimes and killing people and torturing people and all that in a vacuum, right? That is not what happened. We have at least in the case of every terrorist organization, there are at least 2 governmental organizations involved, and the terrorists themselves are usually men who are vulnerable to being recruited because they have no hope in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They're normal guys that are happy in their lives, that have, homes and families, and they're not living in poverty, and they're not living with war and fear and disease and death and torture, aren't going to be easily recruited to go do horrible things to other people for a cause.
Right.
And so you have these agencies and the terrorists' own government organizations, or, I don't know, para-government organizations, telling them lies about what their rewards are going to be and what their life is going to be like. And by the way, drugging them often, to recruit for something like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of the many other terrorist organizations that the United States has dealt with over the years.
All of them.
The leaders of these different movements, they take these guys into, beautiful gardens, and then they drug them with hashish or opium, and they tell them this fabulous story about what a beautiful place they're going to go to after they die, and they use women as baits, right? How many virgins they're going to have in the next life to marry, and what kind of family they can have in the next life, the things they cannot have in this life.
Mm-hmm.
And, they promise to start to help them find wives in this life as well, and take care of the wife if the husband gets killed or blows himself up or whatever. So I mean, we're talking complete and utter exploitation. We're talking grooming. We're talking finding the most vulnerable men out there, men who have nothing left to lose and everything to gain, and making glorious and completely ungivable promises to get them to do horrible things to other people. And the ones that fall for it probably aren't very smart and probably have some sort of mental health condition.
Yeah.
So, and then you have our government facilitating that for its proxy wars.
Yeah. And you got to think about it. Like, that's probably why they don't really take a serious approach to, like, mental health. They want people out here just on the brink of whatever kind of murderous rampage,
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's sick. It's sickening.
This is the history of Western government. Our government's not the only one that does this shit, right? It's just probably the one that's been doing it the most effectively for the last century.
Yes.
But the United States government is basically exploiting incels as cannon fodder and patsies.
Mm.
That's why there is literature out there from the government demonizing incels and treating them as a threat. It makes it easier to use that carrot and that stick.
Yeah.
People don't ask as many questions when you use the carrot and the stick on social outcasts.
Mm-mm-mm.
And so, and actually, if you scroll down on this article, you'll see right here, this is from Forbes. Forbes and other agencies paid informants $548 million. And if you look at the numbers, you'll see right there, and this is from several years ago, many informants were authorized to commit crimes with the permission of their federal handlers, which means when the Justice Department investigates, the CIA intervenes, just as the CIA did in Hunter Biden's case. If you remember, the man who paid Hunter Biden's taxes for the past 5 years, the man who was his sugar daddy, and when the Justice Department came to question him, the reason they called off the questioning was because the CIA stepped in and said, not this one. And this is a story that plays out, and it's not just the FBI. This is not just the CIA. This is a CIA, DOD, FBI counterintelligence. They all work together through the interagency. What I'm describing is a possible and very disturbing explanation for the invincibility cloak that Ryan Routh has had for years.
Now, I want to remind people, text messages from the Biden family came out in the last year that pretty much reveal that Hunter Biden was a very broken man. That kind of all of Biden's children are broken, but
yeah,
particularly Hunter Biden. There are mental health conditions there. There's drug addiction there. There's pain and suffering there. This man needed help for decades and got exploited by his own family, and it sounds like by the government as well, which makes sense because his father has been in government since he was a young man.
Yeah.
So yeah, when they look for someone to exploit like that, they don't look for the guy who has a wife and kids and a great job and is already obeying all the laws and has never done anything weird or crazy. They look for the guy that holed himself up in a business over some stupid dispute and had to be extracted by police through negotiations. They look for the guy that is just crazy enough to go looking for a spot in the fence that he can use to maybe access a presidential candidate and try to shoot him. They're not looking for their best. They're looking for the weirdest, the craziest, the easiest to throw under the bus if things go wrong.
Yeah. God damn.
And now there's another element of this that gets to what Routh was doing. Because, look, he is obviously a crazy person. He has that sort of E. Jean Carroll, crazy eyes, wacko
See,
cadence.
I'm not the only one that saw it.
And I'm not, first of all, I'm not alleging anything. This is all just preliminary sense making of the evidence that we have so far in the, given the total black hole void of official guidance on everything, and frankly, the lack of credibility in the officials issuing the non-guidance that they haven't even issued. But what I'm getting at here is everything the CIA does, everything that state and DOD does when it comes to things like recruiting terrorists, recruiting violent extremists willing to fight in a holy crusade to kill their blood enemies, everything that touches that domain runs through a labyrinthian network of contractors and subcontractors and subcontractors of subcontractors and subcontractors of subcontractors of subcontractors. It's like this Russian doll situation, where it's just there are so many links in the chain, and there's a number of reasons that that's done. It's done always. Remember, 70% of the CI's budget every year is spent on contractors. So every operation, remember, 30% of the budget is just to, upkeep, maintenance, bookkeeping, accounting, legal. So 70% of it is spent on contractors. Every operation runs through contractors and the contractors, subcontractors, because you want to create 10 to 12 layers of subcontracting out, because that is what gives you plausible deniability.
Yep, It wasn't us. It was this independent company that has nothing to do with us. And since you can't just directly connect them, and I'm going to compare this to something weird, all right? Years ago, I started digging into the research that is used to determine rape prevalence in the United States. How they get the 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 numbers that they put out there for years. And it was a weird rabbit hole, like a weird ass rabbit hole, okay? So you look at the report, and the report will have references for every statement that it makes as, this is already a known fact. We already know X because this researcher proved it. And then you got to look up that research to see, how did they prove it? And there's a document that was created by, originally by Murray Strauss. Murray Strauss wrote about the way that feminists use chicanery to make false claims sound proved by research. And one of the things that he talked about was when they do their research, they might only ask the questions that get the answers they want, but not ask questions that get answers they don't want.
Right.
Another thing is that they claim their research. They draw conclusions in their research that are not actually supported by the data. They make statements in the research that are not supported by the data. One of those woozles that got started years ago was that in domestic violence situations, most of the time when women are violent in those situations, in the two-way violence in the situations, feminists will tell you, oh, that's self-defense. They're almost always engaging in self-defense. But that traces back to a statement made in a research paper that has no data to support that claim. And it just gets repeated in paper after paper. And so every feminist research report, the report that you see that has all this stuff as a given, the basis for now we're asking this new question and we're using this methodology that's tested and proven methodology that we've all agreed is solid, rock solid, right? It's on a house of cards of self-reference from within the movement where none of that is actually tried and true. None of that is actually tested and found flawless. They've just said it was. And then the next person uses it, and the next person, and the next person, and suddenly there's a whole body of research using it, so it must be true.
Man, it doesn't surprise me, but it sure as hell pisses me off.
Yeah. And
damn.
when you finally get back to the original thing that actually isn't true, that everybody's been using, feminists won't take responsibility for it, because it wasn't them, it was that person.
Right.
But none of their research that was based on it is flawed because, distancing and stuff.
Yeah.
Right? The academic circle jerk, as Xenodemon so aptly put it, is completely irrelevant. Pay no attention to that. we'll just put it right over there behind the curtain. What we have to say is not affected by it at all, right? And this plausible deniability. Well, the CIA wasn't involved. It was this company. They went rogue. Totally went rogue. We're going to blame all the people in that company. And on paper, on camera, in public, they're destroyed. Their career is over, right? And then we're going to quietly move them to some other agency or organization with no criminal prosecution. And you just won't know about that part.
Mm-hmm. God.
If the 12th person in the chain does something dumb, if they get caught, if they get in trouble with the law, if they confess to the New York Times, you now can say, wasn't us. Even if he says he was CIA, even if he says that his friends were, even if these are the people he were following on X, he talked to this guy talked to this guy was hired by this guy, and that guy happens to have a connection to the agency. This is the bread and butter 101 of plausible deniability work. Now, the other thing is this is not a line of business that, the people who would be doing this low-level recruiting, because what Ralph was doing is he was trawling social media. He was trawling Twitter and Facebook and Telegram and WhatsApp and going into these channels in Haiti, going into these channels in Afghanistan, these channels in Pakistan, these channels in Iran, and soliciting them to drop their life and move and die and die in Ukraine. This is the sort of thing that it seems highly likely, given that this is the Ukraine war is the number one main conflict zone of the CIA and DOD. It is the CIA built that network that he is recruiting from. I mean, literally, those Afghan militants were capacity built from bubkis in the 1970s into a fighting force because we were weaponing them. We were fashioning them as weapons to fight the Cold War in Afghanistan.
So he's talking about the proxy war between the U.S. and Russia in Afghanistan, where the United States trained religious warriors, religious fighters, to fight against, in a civil war in Afghanistan, to fight against fighters that Russia was training. Not our country, not their country, but both governments got involved in this civil war, and both governments fought tooth and nail for control over it in the desert. Where there's nothing but maybe oil.
Yeah.
As I mentioned. And in fact, they have been to listen to our former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, if you recall the famous WikiLeaks email from 2012, where Hillary Clinton told Jake Sullivan and the others on the email chain at the National Security Council, representing the State Department in an official communication, that Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. Remember, ISIS is the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And
So, I think now we have maybe a little better understanding of why, God, I can't think of his name, the WikiLeaks creator.
Assange. Julian Assange.
Why he was arrested. Why did they go after Assange? Because he exposed something that maybe most people didn't understand. Maybe most people weren't really keyed into this. But Hillary Clinton was talking about the U.S. manipulation of one terrorist organization against another terrorist organization. And it is one terrorist organization we built against another terrorist organization that we caused.
Yeah.
And again, like, this is the government getting men to kill each other, real, living, breathing men with flesh and blood and bones, to blow each other up like a game of tin soldiers.
Yeah. It's horrific. Absolutely horrific.
At the Secretary
It's terrifying. When you think about this, and then you realize this is the agency, the entity, like the not the agency, but the organization, the corporation, because the United States, like every other country, is a corporation. Everybody talks about corporations like they're not the same thing as a state, federal government. But when you walk in or drive into a city or a town in the United States, and I think in the UK and Canada as well, you will see that you're entering the city limits, the incorporated city limits of your community. Every government is a corporation, whether it is the federal government, the state government, the county government, the city government, a village government. It is a corporation.
Yep, absolutely true.
This is a corporation playing tin soldiers with human lives. Mostly men. Almost exclusively men. And, Quinn points out Afghanistan does have a lot of poppy plant farms. That is true. And, they were divided. They were already divided into 5 factions when the U.S. went in there. Jen Bottle has pointed that out. So we're looking at just one of the most horrific bits of information to come out. And what did I just activate? Okay, sorry. I just had a big white square show up on my screen. I don't think it showed up on your screens, but it came out of nowhere, and apparently it's gone now. So, but this is who is in charge of determining whether or not to reinstate, or rather reenact, a draft, because we're in the first stage of the draft all the time. The first stage of the draft is the fact that men have to register for selective service, and so there is already the shopping list. That's the first stage of going to the store. The second stage is actually making the trip, actually doing the draft, and telling men that they have to report. And then, of course, the third stage of that is sorting out the ones that are considered useful for the purposes of the government at the time, and sending the rest home as unfit to serve. And most of them will be deemed useful because the government wants cannon fodder. And then after that, it's sending them, training them, and sending them to war. Richard Beer says, only in Ohio and Mississippi do the city limits actually mark their signs as corporation limit. So the rest of them don't tell you. But even going back into, I want to say, 13th century UK, governments have been corporations. They have been incorporated. And they have a description of their corporation as part of their legal paperwork. So it's not even something new. It's just something that people are not really aware of.
Yeah.
Or at least not commonly. They used to teach it in school. I learned this in high school. I'll bet Gen Y and Gen Z didn't.
Oh, absolutely not. There's no way. I didn't learn that. I just learned that, I think last year.
Yeah. I mean, I know I kind of talked about it a little bit when we were going over the history of suffrage, when we were talking about the transition from feudalism to the landlord system and the monarchy and everything. But it was really brief, so I don't know how many people got it then. But yeah, your city that you live in is a corporation. The state or province that it is in, that's also a corporation. The county that your city is in is a corporation, and your federal government is a corporation. So there you go.
State, which is effectively the quarterback of the CIA. The CIA only exists to serve as a support agency for what the State Department is doing or for what the Pentagon is doing. That's all it does. It's just there's a State Department foreign policy goal, but it's too dirty for the State Department, so they need plausible deniability. So the CIA is tasked with it. Same thing when it comes to the war fighting or military functions, where the CIA can be a nimble operator in those regards. And so when the Secretary of State, because remember, that's a promotion. Mike Pompeo was the director of the CIA. He got promoted to the Secretary of State. Bill Burns, our current CIA director, never worked for the CIA before. How did he become CIA director, having never worked for the CIA a day in his life? Well, it's because he had spent 35 years in the State Department. It's the same job, and the State Department's the boss. So you'll see this, right, highlighted there.
Recycling.
Yeah.
ISIS is on our side.
Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria.
Yes. And this is who, so, and the CIA was, it was hilarious because you can also look up, funny reporting where we had so many CIA DOD operations going on in Syria between that some of our terrorist groups started fighting our other terrorist groups. You can look up a funny case that happened a few years ago. I believe this was in the LA Times, where CIA-backed terrorist groups were fighting Pentagon-backed terrorist groups. I mean, this is the whole thing is a monopoly yacht.
Right? It's like a game for them.
Oh my God, I don't know why I'm laughing. This is fucking horrific.
Yes. Yeah. I'm when I first learned about this, and this was reported. This was reported not just by like the alternative media, but this was mainstream establishment media had to admit this. And people, it just kind of flew under a lot of people's radars, went over their heads. Yeah. Oh yeah. The Keystone Cops killed a bunch of men by having them sending them to war with each other. And you think about this. This isn't football or rugby or soccer, pro wrestling. This is bombs and guns. This is gangrene, sepsis, and death.
Yep.
And you laugh at the incompetence, because what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
As a citizen. And again, we're looking. I want to remind you, these guys are not men that were pulled from offices in companies that were successfully selling some product or marketing some service or doing tech support or anything like that. These are guys that were living in poverty, alone, no hope, no prospects, that got promises made that sounded good enough, that given their current circumstances, the risk of death was not that bad. Not just death, but traumatic, painful death. Yeah, we'll be willing to risk this traumatic, painful death to get that because the current situation is so bad that gamble is worth it.
Yeah.
Yahtzee game. It's a blob Yahtzee game, effectively, where it's just a total smorgasbord of CIA DOD activity. And the fact is and I didn't populate this because I didn't have time in the Google Doc, in the PPF whatever thing that I sent over. But there are literally hundreds. It is overwhelming. Hundreds of tweets and Facebook posts and screenshots of WhatsApp messages of the thousands, 1,000 here, 3,000 here, 5,000 here, of these Al Qaeda fighters essentially, being solicited to get no-look visas to fight the war in Ukraine. And I'm going to get to the visa thing here because I think that ultimately might be, if Congress is allowed to investigate this, what cracks the whole thing open. But I do want to make one other point first. Yeah, this is funny, right? In Syria, militants armed by the Pentagon fight those armed by the CIA, right? And if you remember, where did CBP say that?
I just want to point out, that's not Alex Jones. That's the LA Times. They had to admit that. And again, it's like when you don't think about what that actually entails on the ground and you realize the fuck up that represents, it's hard to not laugh at the government for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I understand laughing at it and everything. It's just, sometimes things are so crazy.
Yeah. It just feels like it's too big to do anything about. You know what I mean? How do you fix that? How do we get these fucking people out of here?
Well, you stop funding their agencies.
Well, yeah.
And I will
that
say
means
this.
we all have to stop paying taxes, which I'm down for.
You know what we're going to hear about when that happens? Trump gets elected, and he starts defunding these agencies and starts not just slashing budgets, but personnel levels and everything. Where he's telling these incompetents, "You're fired," which is what he's famous for, right? You're fired. We're going to hear about all of the contractor jobs that get lost. And we're going to hear about it like it's a bad thing. And when you hear about this job loss, this catastrophic job loss, I want you to remember two things. One, the job of these contractors was seducing hopeless, vulnerable men into war to blow each other up. And two, there's a shortage of workers right now in a lot of different jobs. There are jobs those people can get that don't involve getting men to kill each other. And, there's also a third thing. A lot of those people should be locked up.
Yeah.
And deprogrammed. Like cult deprogrammed. Because what they do for a living and what they've been trained to think like, they can't take that out into the real world and be effective, law-abiding citizens. There is going to be something wrong with them for the rest of their lives unless they get help. And they're probably mostly men, too.
That Mr. Routh was traveling around in and who he was working with, it was Pakistan, it was Iran, it was Afghanistan, it was also Syria. So he's literally recruiting from the CIA DoD network. Now, this is dirty work. After the 2014 coup in Ukraine, where we overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine, however you feel about it, I'm not opining on foreign policy. I only care about internet censorship. You just need to understand these dynamics to know what you're up against, because these are the same people who are responsible for global internet censorship.
But the fact is, what he just said.
You can also look at reporting about the mass.
The United States orchestrated the overthrow of the previous government in Ukraine, and now there's a war between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I'm not gonna. It's hard to posit what would have happened between Russia and the previous government. But yeah. Um, Yeah, Packard has pointed out JFK fired Dulles from first CIA head, sought to downfund the CIA, not even totally defund it, just cut their funding, and was killed within a year, using a former CIA operative as the fall guy.
Of course.
Right? Like that's and the boomer generation, by the way, was just as a generation was just completely flummoxed by that. Like, that was the mystery of their generation. What really happened in JFK.
Now we know.
Very strange, peculiar influx of Al-Qaeda and ISIS fighters into Ukraine after the 2014 coup, when this was before the 2022 war broke out between Ukraine and Russia formally. The entire eastern half of Ukraine formally seceded from the Ukraine government, the newly installed U.S. Embassy in Kiev government. Remember, they installed that. That was the hot mic between the U.S. ambassador, that is the head of the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, the exact place that Ryan Routh claimed that he was communicating with to get visas for these terrorists. That was Jeff Pyatt and Victoria Nuland, who was then the Assistant Secretary for Europe and Eurasian Affairs. So the regional head and the head of the embassy are called on a hot mic installing the new president. The entire eastern half of the country says, actually, we didn't vote for this person. We're going to do our own thing. And then Crimea also voted to join the Russian Federation. But from 2014 to 2022, the CIA, the DOD, British intelligence, the British Ministry of Defense, and support from NATO partners like Canada, who has its own oil and gas interests in Ukraine as well, and some of these other supporting economic stakeholders, were supplying money, muscle, and running these recruiting networks to try to bring in militants from all around the world to help the upstart, scrappy Western Ukraine military, which was very fledgling at the time and needed to be capacity built. They needed to add bodies, and this is something that the CIA had been doing for a very long time. You can go back to the Chechnya Russia affair, where there was also these sort of Islamic terrorist groups that were incubated by the CIA at that time. So these networks had been already very well established, but there was this mass influx of ISIS and Al-Qaeda fighters to go out and kill the Russian ethnic Ukrainians living in the eastern part of the state. And so
let's
they had been sourcing from these networks.
For a second. I want to repeat that sentence too, because there's a word for that. And I want you guys all to think about this, because this is, again, the United States manipulating men who are in terrorist organizations who do horrific things to other people because they have been manipulated from a condition of being mentally ill, maybe not too bright, very vulnerable, to think that if they do these things, they're going to get a reward, that makes it worth the gamble of maybe I'll get blown limb to limb in the process of doing this, right? To do this thing that has a name. And when I say the name, I want it to be really clear, so I'm going to go through his description again.
For a very long time, you can go back to the Chechnya Russia affair, where there was also these sort of Islamic terrorist groups that were incubated by the CIA at that time. So these networks had been already very well established, but there was this mass influx of ISIS and Al-Qaeda fighters to go out and kill the Russian ethnic Ukrainians living in the eastern part of the state.
So U.S.-sponsored terrorist groups being sent to kill members of an ethnic group living in a foreign country. That is genocide.
Yeah, that fits. That absolutely fucking tracks.
Our government sponsored genocide.
You know what's hilarious to me is that our government is trying to make us believe that Russia is the bad guy here. They I'm not saying that they do everything right. Lord knows Putin is a nasty motherfucker, but we're just as guilty as everyone involved.
Yeah.
If not more so.
Y'all want to know why I hate government?
God.
Right? We're supposed to be the good guys, according to our whole history of what we've been told about our country and our government. Our government, the people we voted into office, and the bureaucracy they have in place, that they keep in place, that they maintain, sponsored genocide and sent mentally ill, low intelligence, manipulated nut jobs in to do the dirty work that were recruited by contractors who are probably also mentally ill, low intelligence, nut job, manipulated into doing the dirty work. Mostly men.
Crazy.
They take from the bottom of the barrel, and they take people that could be assisted. You know, what I do for a living, what my main job is the exact polar opposite. I take people in situations that are profoundly difficult, where their lives have very, very little in them that is easy for them, right? Where people for whom just the process of getting out of bed in the morning and getting dressed, going to the bathroom and getting dressed, can be an actual step-by-step ordeal of having to do labor and not just, like you get up, but you sit up in your bed without thinking about it, and you stand up without thinking about it, aside from probably some disabled people that are listening. But just most people in normal health, you sit up, you don't think about it, you get out, maybe you think, oh, it's cold, You put your feet on the floor, you put one foot in front of the other, you walk into the bathroom, you sit yourself down on the toilet, or you stand yourself in front of the toilet. You don't need somebody else's help to do that, right? And in that spectrum of people that I take care of, there are some people who can have jobs and make enough money to buy their own groceries and make enough money to go on vacation once in a while and everything. And those are the people that I'm helping. If somebody came along and took from maybe the top echelon of that group, and in that group, most of the men are involuntarily celibate, right? I will say this: most females who are intellectually disabled can still find somebody who wants to form some degree of intimate partnership with them. Most men who are intellectually disabled cannot. So you're looking at people who have, if they don't have support like the system that exists in the United States to support people with disabilities and intellectual disabilities, mental health disabilities, there are people who couldn't live on their own, who would be living in poverty, who would be starving, who would be in terrible health, who might be living in filth, who might be, abused by their families. Maybe not even on purpose, because a lot of times abuse that takes place when you're dealing with medical situations that a layman doesn't understand is unintentional. It's just the people that are trying to provide care for this person don't know how, and they don't know what to do, and they're doing their best, and their best isn't up to par. which is why systems like the one that I work in have been created. But if you go to a place where such a system is not existent, right, it doesn't happen, there would be a population to draw from that maybe has difficulty feeding themselves, maybe has difficulty finding a niche in society, a place to work, communicating with other people, forming relationships with other people, going out into the community and having any kind of social engagement or economic engagement with the rest of the community at all. And you tell them, we'll solve everything, but you have to do this. You have to carry this gun. You have to strap this bomb to your chest. You have to kill these people. You might get killed. You're probably going to get killed. But afterwards, you're going to get a beautiful garden and 72 virgins, and you can have a family, and you can be like these guys that are successful and happy.
Yeah.
And that's who they're exploiting.
So ugly.
Albert Nader Retro gave us $5. Canadian said, Russia is always the bad guy, even when they were on our side during World War II. Ask the folks from countries they annexed. Russia has committed atrocities. I'm not going to say they haven't. The thing that I'm pointing out here is this might not be the instance where they're the aggressor.
Yeah.
Right? This might be an aggressive reaction to the aggressor.
Mm-hmm.
And the aggressor is our government.
Yeah.
This is really bad. And I'm going to talk about it in a way that doesn't involve governments or law. If you live in an area where there's a organized criminal presence, like a gang, mafia, Bloods, Crips, whatever, there's hundreds of gangs in the United States now. You could go with one of hundreds of names, and you know that they are fucking nuts, or that they have a organized system of suppressing opposition and resistance to what they do. You don't fuck with them unless you want to activate that system. So if Russia is the bear, and you know that if you poke it with a stick, it is going to try to kill you, you better have a damn good reason for poking it with a stick. You better be doing something pure and innocent and good if you're going to poke it with a stick, because you are activating a killing machine that is going to bite back. Right? So it doesn't matter if what Putin did was bad. Not because we don't care about the morality of it, but because if it was triggered by somebody else, by us, by our government, doing something bad, then we're wrong for setting that off.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter if Russia is or is not the USSR. It really doesn't matter if Russia is or is not bad. It really doesn't matter if Russia is or is not an aggressor in this situation. It matters that we made it happen. We voted for people who set this in motion. Richard Bier asks if homeowners associations count as mafia or gang organizations. I would say they're closer to mafia because they're more organized on paper. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to be careful what I say here. I can't say that mafia is organized on paper, but they're organized in a more similar to a corporation like multi-level marketing corporation way. Whereas other gangs took a lot longer to become that organized, and most of them aren't. It's all verbal. So there's not as much paper, or, that may or may not exist, if that makes sense. So I would say homeowners' organizations are closer to the mafia. They're more established, and they have more pretense at legitimacy. Their front looks more legitimate.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. Fortunately, I live in an apartment, so I don't have to deal with that. The mafia that runs this place is just actually the apartment complex I live in is actually owned by a family, and not the family, a family organization, that we're talking parents and kids and grandkids. So,
that's cool.
yeah, it's pretty decent, and not super expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah. So people asking, you can't really see in your screen, but this video is in a tweet from Mike Benz, who is the man talking. And he was interviewed by Benny Johnson. Benny Johnson mostly just let him talk, because what he had to say, really, he didn't need to be asked questions to say this and explain this. He's just researched this and put this information out there, and he's shown his receipts throughout. So this isn't like, I know there's people saying, oh, I don't trust Benny Johnson, but this isn't Benny Johnson saying this stuff. And
what's wrong with Benny Johnson?
I don't know. I haven't heard why they don't trust him. In terms of, if somebody works in journalism, they start out, for me, if trust goes on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being no trust and 10 being, I would jump off a building and expect them to catch me. Most journalists start out, for me, anybody that declares themselves a journalist or acts as a journalist, before I see their track record, at about -5. So
I like
that. Yeah, I don't know. Jen Bottle says, Lauren, his goddamn face. I don't see a problem with his face, other than the fact that he's doing the duck lips thing.
Yeah.
But he's just kind of, yeah, okay. So Stinky Bun Bun says, I think Benny Johnson worked for BuzzFeed before pretending to be a lifelong conservative. Boy, would that be the hostile work environment from hell if you were a conservative and you worked for BuzzFeed. So maybe he wasn't a lifelong conservative, but the information that we're seeing is still not really deniable here.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot left to this. It looks like we've got about 8 minutes left, but it is, we've been at this for about an hour. I'm gonna maybe go one more statement, and then we'll stop, because I don't want to. I do have my work at my other job tonight, so I'm not gonna do a long show tonight, but we'll finish this up next week.
That's good. Yeah, because whatever is in my system is starting to really kick my ass. I don't know if you can hear me sniffling.
Well, maybe we'll stop here then, and we'll just pick up from here next week. We'll go over this statement again. But I just want to recap real quick. What we heard tonight was how the U.S. government exploits men in foreign countries as tin soldiers to send to war to each other, against each other, and as assassins in coups that are orchestrated by the U.S. government against other countries, and at least in one case as assassins in a genocide, all while maintaining plausible deniability by exploiting vulnerable men.
Right.
So this has been quite the spicy sausage tonight. I need butter. I just, and it's gonna take a while. When I first watched this, I'm still not done digesting it.
Yeah.
Right. So I know you guys, it's gonna take you a while to digest it, and hopefully we're still on YouTube when we come back next week to discuss this. But because YouTube's not gonna like me for this one. But that's I cannot in good conscience ignore this, knowing what this does to men all over the world. We are talking millions of men affected by this. So thanks everybody for sticking out this long sausage. This is it's not so much long as spicy and hard to digest. Thanks, Lauren, for watching this with me and discussing it. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.
Have a good night, y'all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literally have good memory on top of that, too. Holy shit. You're fucked.